Colette? When we think about crops, we really want to focus on the basics. What grows well in our climate? First and foremost, what are the crop requirements? What are the soil requirements, water requirements? And are we adaptable? Because if we're not adaptable to what we want to grow, then veggies sure are not. You can't grow ginger in Salmon, Idaho. And even though I may really want to grow ginger, it just doesn't grow in my climate. So that's a simplified example, but really know your climate and know what grows best. The second part is, what can you market? And this is really important, you guys. You need to do the research and look at the demographics for your area and for your crops. Get out on the street and talk to people. Talk to potential consumers. Talk to your friends. Talk to your family. Who's going to be buying your produce or your crops? And get to know your consumer base. And what are they saying that they want or they need? If you're going to focus on farmers market or CSA, restaurants, talk to those people, because the more you know about your market, the more success you'll have. And I think next week's webinar will really, really underscore that point. But also know that it takes a lot of labor and time to market and market successfully. Various crops are more time intensive than others. Some have really great post-harvest storage capacity, like beets and hay and straw and winter squash and potatoes, while others just wilt and degrade immediately after harvest, like our fruits and our greens, our squash blossoms, our herbs. So know what you can market, but also know what is involved with that marketing and what type of labor and time you'll have to dedicate. Some crops are easy to grow and harvest with existing or affordable equipment. You may have things laying around that will work just fine, but you really need to analyze what you have on hand and kind of match your first crop enterprise to that. Don't jump into small grains production without having any small grains equipment, because number one, it's expensive, and you may not be able to be successful that first year by investing all that capital into those equipment needed. Crops that match your time and labor resources is very important, and it really should relate directly back to match your whole farm goals. For example, if you don't want to be tied to your farm 7 days a week in the summer, then maybe you shouldn't do a CSA. Maybe you shouldn't be planting summer squash, which sometimes needs to be harvested at least once a day, or if not twice in the height of the summer. You might be better suited for more perennial crops instead of annual vegetable production, for example. But really analyze your time, analyze your farm goals, and match them to your crop, like Melissa mentioned in terms of livestock production too. The complementary enterprises that Cinda talked about were excellent. I think it's really important to tie in these enterprises into a crop enterprise or a market garden like we have at Lady Bird. But just make sure that it makes sense. Cover crops in rotation with livestock or seed production for feed, all of those fit very well when you're looking at different crop enterprises on the farm. Next slide. So veggies and melons are sort of the first examples of different crop enterprises, although there are dozens and dozens and dozens of different crops to talk about, but we're going to just lump them together here. And again, when we're thinking about vegetables and melons, let's go down the list. Which veggies and melons actually grow in our climate? Do these crops meet your soil and your water and your climate resources that exist? And can you market it? Most veggies on our scale are direct marketed. They're directly marketed to consumers, which means that takes a lot of time away from digging in the dirt. It's spent building relationships, either at the farmer's market or talking to restaurant personnel or marketing directly to your CSA. Most veggie production is farm fresh, harvest it, and sell it immediately. It's a quick turnaround. And so you have to realize the market potential is huge. However, so is the time and labor and equipment needed as well. There's various little sub-enterprises like nursery plants or different specialty crops like exotics and heirlooms and ethnic varieties and baby vegetables. You can kind of go on forever, but one thing to remember is that with veggies, it is the most popular in terms of crop enterprises. I feel, at least in the Pacific Northwest, and there's a lot of competition for these sorts of fresh local food. So if there is a lot of competition for our veggies, I think it's not a limiting factor, but it is a challenge, and you have to explore different options to overcome these challenges if people already grow a similar crop in your area. How are you going to address it? How are you going to make your crop stand out? And I really urge you to consider not simply dropping the price because I think it undermines the whole healthy food movement. A classic example is going to the farmer's market and two people have stands right next to each other, two different types of tomatoes, and one is a full-time farmer and one is what we call a hobby farmer or a part-time farmer. And the part-time farmer just sells his tomatoes for 25 cents a pound just because he has a glut of tomatoes, while the full-time farmer is trying to really make a living. So just simply lowering your price isn't really a good strategy in terms of making your crops stand out. There's other ways to do that. Season extension can certainly play a critical role with this. You can be the first to have greens at the farmer's market, and you can be the last person to have tomatoes with simple hoop houses. And Diane Green will explore these different strategies next week, but there's so many ways to get creative. I do want to just mention on the heirloom varieties, if you do go that direction, they are exciting and they're beautiful, and it's a wonderful source of seed diversity in our food supply, but they also don't tend to grow as reliably or ship very well or transport very well sometimes. So that's sort of some things that you're going to have to keep in mind. And a lot of this is trial and error, which is okay. Farming is trial and error. You'll get used to it, but just kind of keep that in the back of your mind. Let's see. Veggies can certainly be very labor intensive. We talked about time and labor and equipment needed for vegetable and melon enterprises. And just for example, on our CSA, each week we would harvest for our CSA harvest, we would harvest 10 pounds of salad greens using scissors in the same amount of time it would take to harvest our weekly 250 pounds of cucumbers. It would, and all of this needed to be kept cool. So number one, time it takes to harvest, and number two, where on earth are we going to keep all of these veggies once we do harvest them? It's called post-harvest handling, and it's something that we need to look into in terms of equipment. If you're going to do veggies and melons, know that post-harvest handling is incredibly important. Next slide, please. Thank you. Gourds and pumpkins are another sort of niche enterprise. which I haven't really gotten into, but many folks have. They're a great seasonal item. People absolutely love to buy gourds and pumpkins in the fall when the weather starts changing. You can market them as decoration or eating. You can add value to this crop by carving them, painting them, making pies. All sorts of value-added products can come from gourds and pumpkins. You can also grow specialty varieties like white or miniature pumpkins, and of course specialty gourds like the bird neck gourds for birdhouses, rattles. It takes a lot to market them, and it takes a lot of labor to do the harvesting. Gourds and pumpkins are heavy, and so as long as you're aware of the labor involved, I think it's a great thing to do as part of your whole farm plan. They do have a long season. Pumpkins can probably grow a lot of the places where our participants live, but gourds, I'm not quite sure. We don't have much luck with gourds in southern Idaho. Probably not much luck in central Idaho. I included winter squash in here because I included it as a challenge, because not many folks really eat the giant Hubbard or pink banana types of winter squash anymore. So I asked then, what can we do to add value to these behemoths and sell them and get a good price for them? Some of the suggestions that come to mind would be you could do a frozen soup base, you could do smaller little specialty varieties of, there's some mini Hubbard's varieties out there that taste pretty good. You could also do pies or edible decorations, things like that. But winter squash is definitely a challenge because you can grow this beautiful, 50-pound, huge Hubbard and have nowhere to market it. Diane Green, again, can talk a little bit about this hopefully next week, but she does have a great pumpkin project that she does on her farm called Green Tree Naturals in Sandpoint, and it's where the school kids come out to plant the pumpkins, and then they come back and harvest the pumpkins. So it's a really good farm education, sort of agritourism niche market. Next slide.